Hello, I'm Alexandre from the University of Tours, and today I'll be presenting a joint work between Nicolas, Patrick, Vincent, and also Stefano from the University of Bologna, and obviously myself, that is titled Automatic Generation of Comparisons Notebook for Interactive Data Exploration. This work focuses on exploratory data analysis, a notoriously hard task usually done by human experts for highlighting insights in the data. Among the many approaches to automate EDA, in this work we focus on the automatic generation of EDA notebooks consisting of SQL queries expressing comparisons. Why comparisons? Well, simply because comparisons are the most common pattern used during EDA. Previous work investigated its logical semantics, and it's been shown that it can be associated with statistical testing. For example, we will be using this running example. Here we have the comparison of two series of data, namely the COVID cases by continents between April and May 2020. Moving on to our contribution, our first contribution is a logical framework for defining comparisons, insight, and hypothesis using relational algebra as a basis. Comparisons are what users see during the exploration, so the results that they presented in the final notebook. And it requires so two categorical attributes, the A that is used as a group key, the B from which two values are drawn in its active domain for the selection. So for example, it would be the month in our little running example, and the two values we chosen is April and May. And finally, we associate a single measure and an aggregation function. So for example, in our example, it's the sum of COVID cases. Then moving on to insight. So comparison is not an insight in itself, it's just a way to present the user with data. In the definition of insight, we retrieve the categorical attribute B and the two distinct values. In its active domain, we also have the measure, and we add a predicate that specifies the semantic of the insight. So for example, the average value of cases for the month of May is higher than for the month of April. Obviously, you don't see the attribute A here that we defined earlier, the group key. And this is because the insight is computed and unaggregated data, and this data is used for statistical testing that can prove that an insight is statistically significant. To make a link between insights and comparisons, we need to formulate an hypothesis query. Here we have a simple example with the with clause in SQL, and it is simply used to verify that comparison query is consistent with an insight. So for example, if the evidence on the whole dataset suggests the average number of cases for the month of May is higher than April, then we cannot show any comparison queries that will contradict this factual evidence that has been verified statistically. So if the hypothesis query evaluates to true, it means the comparison query supports the insight. With those definitions out of the way, we can finally formulate the generation of a comparison query notebook as a multi-objective optimization problem. So given a set of comparison queries, Q, along with their costs, their interestingness, and distances between them, we are looking for the most interesting and coherent sequence of those queries, such as its overall cost is bounded under a specific constant. The cost of query is traditionally measured as the execution time. In our case, we postulated and verified empirically that it is going to be very similar for all comparison queries that are formed with the rigid pattern we presented earlier. So we set it to a constant and we use it to bound the number of queries in the notebook. Interestingness is more complex, and there has been quite a debate in the literature. We use a combination of insight significance and surprise obtained via statistical testing, obviously, and we throw into the mix the conciseness of the comparison query. There are details on how to do this in the paper, obviously. And finally, for the distance between the queries, we adapted the an earlier work in the form of a weighted Hamming distance over the query parts. So, for example, query part could be the selection part, projection part, etc. A naive algorithm for generating comparison notebooks consists of generating the whole set of comparison queries, run statistical tests for all potential insights to compute their testingness, and then solve exactly the tap problem. Obviously, this approach only works for small datasets due to the number of potential insights and queries for large databases. And so we simply implemented it as a proof of concept to compare to optimized approaches. So the optimization we decided on are first on the statistical testing that's performed on samples in memory, and we use a resampling method because it does not have any assumption about distributions in the data. Second, we minimize the number of queries to run over the database, merging group bys in such a way that aggregates fit in memory, and the sets of aggregates to load in memory is determined by solving a weighted set cover problem using a simple greedy heuristics. Finally, since one insight can be evidenced by many comparison queries, it does not have to be supported by only one. We only keep the one comparison query per insight, and we keep obviously the most interesting one. And as for the solving of the NPR tap problem, we adapted the classic knapsack heuristics to solve tap for larger instances, and basically it compares as a sorting the entire set of queries in order of their interest, and then iterating over this sorted list, putting queries in the solution iteratively at specific points. So it's not like the knapsack heuristic where you put them in the bag. You are trying to insert them optimally in the existing sequence. So we ran a series of experiments on 3 datasets, so a very small toy dataset to test the exact approach, the naive approach, and 2 larger datasets. Obviously, we tested the optimization alone and then all the optimization together. So we tested the 2 sampling strategy for the statistical testing, and we also tested with and without doing the group by merging and hypothesis queries in memory. So looking at the breakdown of the runtime, obviously the naive exact approach is extremely long, especially solving the problem takes very long, more than an hour using a specialized solver program. The other thing to note is that the time in blue, that is the largest time even in the weighted set cover random approximative and unbalanced approximative approaches, the last 2 that are all the optimizations together, we see the statistical testing takes a significant part of the runtime. So we also tested the scalability of the sampling approach alone. So we tested various sample size from 5% to 30% of the data set. And first we can see that for small samples, the runtime in red and blue remains acceptable, and the unbalanced sampling is better than the random sampling. Noticeably, the percentage of insights reported can be over 100%, so the green and yellow curves. And this is because since sampling is used, the approach can also report spurious insight, i.e. insights that are significant in the sample but not in the complete dataset. Finally, we ran a small user study with volunteers who manually analyzed the notebooks produced with each of the approaches, and also with various definitions of interestingness, so only using part of the three-parter interestingness function. And it turned out that while the perceived quality is diverse, some notebooks were found informative and even on par with human expertise. We also did not see any significant differences between the perceptions of the notebook's quality generated exactly and heuristically or even on sampled approaches. In this work, we presented an approach for generating SQL notebooks of comparison queries reporting insight validated through statistical verification. Our current works include the speed of the generation of comparison queries, especially the statistical tests that are needed to compute the query interestingness. And we're also working on controlling the generation of spurious insight for large datasets by offering the users guarantees on the sample size. So we're trying to use a Bernstein or Hofding bound to determine the lowest possible sample size without generating spurious insights. On the longer term, we are aiming at obviously extending the approach to have more type of insights and also beyond comparison queries. Thank you very much for your attention. Do not hesitate to visit our GitHub page or to contact us directly if you have any questions.